Hello and welcome to Run Testers. My name's Nick, and in this video we're going to be comparing the Hoka Cielo X1 and the Saucony Endorphin Pro 4. The Endorphin Pro 4 and the Cielo X1 are two big carbon shoe releases for 2024. The Endorphin Pro 4 is the cheaper shoe. It costs £230 or $225, whereas the Cielo is 250 quid or $275. The Cielo is the heavier shoe. It's 253 grams or 8.9 ounces in a UK size 9, whereas the Endorphin Pro 4 is 233 grams or 8.2 ounces in a UK 9. You've got a 7mm drop on the Hoka and an 8mm drop on the Endorphin Pro 4. With the Cielo X1, you've got two layers of a PEVA-based foam that sandwich a winged carbon plate. Obviously got a decoupled midsole design there with that huge cutout that separates the two chunks of foam on one side, and a very aggressive rocker setup on the shoe as well to really move you through your foot strike quickly. You have a knit upper with a partially gutted tongue and then these slightly stiff and strange laces that Hoka's put on the shoe. Not a huge amount of padding around the Achilles, but there is two little strips there and nothing right at the back. It's got a good Achilles design I always find with Hoka. I don't tend to get too much irritation. Then the outsole has actually got pretty good rubber coverage aside from the sections where there isn't really anything. There's no foam. There's obviously quite a few cutouts on the shoe, a little bit of exposed foam here, but in general you've got quite good rubber coverage on the bottom of the shoe. Then with the Endorphin Pro 4, you've got a dual density midsole setup with Saucony's Power Run PB foam as the bottom layer. That's the foam that's been used on the past generations of the Pro, and then the top layer is Power Run HG, the foam that was introduced with the Endorphin Elite shoe. You've got a carbon plate running through those layers of foam and Saucony's speed roll geometry, which has been a key feature of the Endorphin line of all the shoes. Nice rocker you have on the shoe there. You've also got the SRS sock liner in this latest version of the shoe, which apparently gives you a bit more comfort and bounce. You've got a lightweight mesh upper with a gusted tongue, a little bit of padding around the heel, but again not too much as these are racing shoes. And then a lattice rubber outsole with good forefoot coverage, kind of two strips at the back here, a bit of exposed foam, and again a cutout to keep the weight of the shoe down.
So fit for me in these both shoes have generally been very good. I've got quite skinny feet, so in terms of getting that kind of good kind of hold and lock down in a kind of racing style shoe, I generally don't have many issues. But I would say in terms of these two shoes, they definitely do fit a little bit differently. I think with the Hoka Cielo X1, it is definitely a tighter fit. The nature of the upper is a lot kind of firmer, more rigid, so it's a bit of a squeeze to get into. And I think it's definitely the more narrow feeling shoe ultimately. So if you had a wider kind of foot, then I think you might find it a bit of a squeeze ultimately. The lockdown in terms of you're getting there, the lacing, it's not fantastic. You do have to work a bit harder than you do on the Endorphin Pro 4, which I think is more kind of near to a kind of more traditional style kind of upper and fit in general. You're going to get a good lockdown to the laces and the tongue. I think you get a good amount of space up front of the toes. The kind of volume you're getting in the upper, it's still a racing style kind of fit, but it is definitely a little bit more accommodating in comparison. It's not really much in terms of kind of padding in terms of the heel collar, but ultimately I've had no issues in terms of, you know, kind of rubbing or kind of lockdown at the heel. It's been a similar kind of story with the Cielo X1, which has a little bit of internal padding there. So you're getting a good kind of lockdown there and support, but also you're not getting any kind of rubbing, or I haven't either. So I would say, based on my testing, I would go true to size. What I would say is that the Cielo X1 is definitely a bit more of a narrow fitting kind of race shoe compared to the Endorphin Pro 3, which is definitely a kind of a racing narrow kind of fit as well too, but it definitely feels a little more accommodating in comparison to the Hoka.
When it comes to fit of the two shoes, I've got a UK 9 in both. With Hoka, that's a US 9.5, and with Saucony, it's a US 10. It's the same size I've got on both of these brand shoes across the range, and they both fit me well in that size. Like, I tend to be a US 9.5 or a US 10, so with the UK size, it can go a bit hit and miss sometimes, but Hoka has a slightly smaller fit if you're looking at the UK sizing, but I think it will fit true to size if you're looking at the US sizing. It's not actually an exceptionally narrow shoe either, Cielo X1, unlike some of the Hoka shoes, but I have narrow foot, so I'm not always the best judge of that, but I think both of them have pretty good widths, really good hold around the heel and midfoot, good amount of room in the toe box. I think the fit of both shoes is really good with no irritation at the back of the shoe at all. I think the upper on the Saucony is exceptional. It's got a really nice step-in comfort to it, which is, you know, unusual in a carbon plate racing shoe, but they've both got a good fit in my normal running shoe size for these brands. So I've been using both of these shoes for some long, hard workouts during my marathon training over the past couple of months, and I have enjoyed testing them both out. Do think they are quite different carbon plate shoes though. They have very different feel on the run, like something I've also noticed when I was testing them individually, and I did a short run wearing both shoes at the same time, and it's really apparent that the Hoka is the springier shoe for sure. The foam underfoot packs more of a bouncy punch, and I do think it's got a more aggressive rocker as well, whereas the Endorphin Pro has a little bit of a firmer feel. It feels a little bit nimbler for sure, and you do get that roll through with the shoe, but you don't get as much bounce from the foams used in the shoe compared to the Hoka, certainly. So Hoka I've absolutely adored testing. I have to say I've done a really hard track workout in the shoe, and then a 24-miler as part of my marathon training, longest run of my marathon training block, starting at an easy pace and moving down towards marathon pace at the end. And basically at any pace it felt great. On the track I was doing reps, from 330 a k down to 310 per k with quite minimal recovery, and it is a heavy shoe. We're going to talk about the weight. Obviously with this shoe it's a big thing that comes up a lot, but it is so fast, feels so good underfoot. It's got a really bouncy feeling, that aggressive rocker that actually, although it is aggressive and it feels quick, it really feels good at a wide range of paces. So on that 24-miler I was moving from a very relaxed pace down to, I say, around marathon pace. Done some faster stuff on the track, and it always feels really good in this shoe. Like, you got a big amount of bounce, nice flowing ride through your foot strike thanks to that rocker, and then like I say, a big explosive toe off from all the bouncy stuff in the shoe. You don't really feel the weight that much, or I haven't done yet anyway. Like, I am going to race in this shoe soon, and maybe at the back end of the race you start to notice that weight a little bit more, but so far it hasn't been something that's really been a deterrent at all, and how much I've enjoyed using the shoe just because it is so bouncy. And the Saucony, I've done a couple of really big marathon workouts in, and again enjoyed them both. It's got a much more, I say, muted ride compared to the Hoka, but you could look at that as a negative or a positive. It's a much more natural ride as well. People who want a shoe that doesn't feel too weird on the foot, or don't get on with maybe overly rocker or bouncy shoes, the Endorphin Pro 4 has that more natural feel while still being very fast and still having a bit of a rocker there for sure. And the Power Run HG foam that's been brought to the latest version, I think, gives you a bit more pop off the toes. The long workout on this shoe, running 10k at 330 a k pace, which is goal marathon pace, then straight into a park run, and then another 8k at 330 a k pace. And yeah, it really does the job of a carbon shoe in making those long workouts and those extended sections at race pace feel comfortable and more easy, because you are rolling through your foot strike very naturally. I think it's a little bit nimbler and more agile than the Hoka for sure. You get a bit of an edge if you're going around corners and that kind of thing. It doesn't have necessarily the punch in a straight line that you get from the Hoka, but it is the slightly lighter shoe, and you do get a lot from that rocker and the combination of the foams in the plate just to make holding quick paces feel that bit easier. So yeah, certainly the run test in both shoes has been very enjoyable, but I think the Hoka probably has the more interesting and exciting ride, but whether that translates to being a more effective racing shoe is hard to tell, because the Endorphin Pro still does deliver a very efficient ride and is that bit lighter.
So into that run test, I've done well over 50k in Endorphin Pro 4 now. I've done kind of 50 miles, around 50 miles in the Cielo X1. That's over 2 shoes, so the prototype version, also the official version that launched as well. What I would say first and foremost, these are 2 fantastic shoes. These are 2 shoes that feel great to run long in. I think kind of marathon, half marathon pace. For me, I'm kind of 7:30 mile pace, kind of below that for kind of half marathon pace. But I think also the Endorphin Pro 4 works a bit better at shorter distances, like quicker, shorter stuff. Well, I think you can do that in the Cielo X1 as well, but I think the design and the feel of the Endorphin Pro 4 just works a little bit better from that point of view. What I'd say is, first and foremost, is the feeling, the rides. They are both bouncy, but the Cielo X1 is definitely bouncier. It's definitely more aggressive in terms of that ride, in terms of, quickly getting you from heel to toe. It definitely feels a lot more aggressive. It's like the Alpha Fly. It's that kind of tippy toe feeling that you get on the Alpha Fly. It's similar to what you get on the Cielo X1. And Endorphin Pro 4, for me, you've got that excellent speed or geometry, which similarly is doing a similar job. It's bouncy as well, but it's absolutely not as bouncy as, or aggressively bouncy as the Cielo X1. It's definitely more stable in terms of that feel, but you definitely get a nice feeling when you are running fast in it, and you'll get, as I said, that speed or geometry makes you have that those quicker transitions from heel to toe, and it feels good to run fast in. It's not the lightest shoe out there, but neither is the Cielo X1. But I think both of them, they don't feel heavy when you're running at your quickest. And from that point of view, I felt like the weights have worked pretty well for me overall. As I said, I feel like the Hoka Cielo X1, you can absolutely kind of cruise in that shoe. It feels nice to run quick in. My legs have always felt good after a long session in those shoes, and I've never felt the effects of running in that shoe. I think it's a similar story with the Endorphin Pro 4. The midsole is softer. It is still got some bounce, but it's just not aggressively bouncy like the Cielo X1. But it's got a firmer edge to it because you've got that Power Run HG in there as well to give it that firmer, more responsive feel over that distance. But I do think that what that does as well is it makes it feel like a nicer shoe to run shorter distances. And I think if I was running shorter races, I think I would reach for the Endorphin Pro 4 over the Cielo X1. As I said, I think it can absolutely work at those short distances, but I think there's a bit more in the Pro 4's locker in terms of what you're getting when you are running quicker over a shorter distance. Durability wise, you know, I've used the Cielo X1 over 2 versions, but I've put a lot of mileage in them and it's felt absolutely fine from that point of view. And I'm not seeing I'm losing anything from those shoes in terms of the performance. The Pro 4, it's a similar story. It was a bit like the Pro 3. I felt like it held well. I feel like the midsole was going to hold better than the Pro 3 in comparison. But I think both of these shoes are going to have good life. I think shoes that you can run a lot in, run long in. You're going to get good level of durability. You can train in them. But also these are shoes that you can run and race long distances in them as well. So yeah, 2 shoes I've absolutely loved running in. Definitely shoes that you can run fast in. They just deliver those experiences slightly differently. I think you've got a more aggressive, bouncier feel on the Cielo X1. I think the Endorphin Pro 4, you're getting something that is bouncy, but it's stable, more accessible, easier to get into, but also feels great to run fast in as well at a variety of distances. So my verdict, whether you should go for the Endorphin Pro 4 or the Hoka Cielo X1. Well, basically what I would say here is that I think these are 2 great shoes. 2 shoes I have absolutely loved running in. I think it really depends what you want from a kind of super shoe. I think with the Cielo X1, it just feels, as I said, it feels like it's giving you that kind of Alpha 5 feel in terms of that experience over that distance. I think the Endorphin Pro 4 absolutely can work at longer distances as well too, but I think maybe it's got a little bit more versatility about it in terms of where you can use it and where it might work best. I think durability wise, I think you're going to get 2 shoes that are going to work and going to be able to cover a lot of mileage in them. Ultimately, the Endorphin Pro 4 is cheaper. From a value point of view, still expensive. I think that would be the one to go for. If you are just looking for this kind of fun, enjoyable, kind of bouncy, as I said, that kind of more aggressive kind of feeling in a super shoe, then that's what the Cielo X1 is going to get you. It's a tougher shoe to get into. The lockdown takes a little bit more work than Endorphin Pro 4, but ultimately what you get in return, if it works for you, it's a really enjoyable shoe to run in that has a lot going for it. And again, the Endorphin Pro 4 as well. As I said, it really comes down to where your kind of priorities lie. If you want that kind of really kind of unadulterated fun shoe that can work, you know, and it gives you that really bouncy, big bouncy feeling, Cielo X1. If you want that kind of versatile shoe that works for shorter and longer distances, still gives you that kind of lovely, quick kind of feeling over, you know, that kind of marathon distance as well, and those longer runs, and absolutely Endorphin Pro 4 is the one you should go for, and it's cheaper as well, so that's worth keeping in mind because the Cielo X1 is definitely not a cheap shoe.
When it comes to the verdict, I really love the Hoka Cielo X1. I just love the way it feels underfoot, and I always think if you're really struggling to pick a shoe or not really sure, then just going with the one that feels right is always the way to go. And this shoe does feel right, and I think I prefer it to the Endorphin Pro 4 myself. It's a bit more expensive, it's a bit heavier. I think mainly as someone who really races marathons as my main target races, I don't think that'd be such a big factor because, well, the price would still be a factor, but the weight not so much. I think over the course of a marathon, I don't think it would matter so much to have that little bit of extra weight for the extra bounce you get from the shoe. If you're someone who's looking for probably a broader range ratio with one shoe to use for everything, you do a lot more 5 and 10Ks that you really target and go for, then I think the Endorphin Pro 4 probably has a slightly better range to it as a racing shoe, and it is a lot cheaper. But I think if you're looking for that bouncy super shoe feeling, the Cielo X1 is the one that provides it of the 2. So I think a lot of people might just discount the Cielo based on weight alone, but I don't know, it's a hard thing to judge, but in the runs I've done with it, I do think the level of bounce and propulsion you get from it makes up for the slight extra weight it has compared to a shoe like the Endorphin Pro 4. But that said, this is still a great racing shoe, and it is a good value racing shoe as well in the current market. It is cheaper than most shoes, including the Cielo X1. Would have no hesitation saying grab the Endorphin Pro 4, especially if you don't like overly squishy and rockered shoes, because the Cielo X1 is certainly those things. This has a more natural feel, is a bit cheaper, lighter, nimbler, still a great racer at every distance, but I think certainly at marathon distance, I definitely would prefer the Cielo X1, and at half marathon distance as well. And at the shorter races, you know, it's a bit more of a close call. Definitely would come down a bit more to your preference in ride feel, but overall, in my verdict, I'd give it to the Cielo X1, but there's lots of reasons to look at the Endorphin Pro 4. That's our comparison of the Cielo X1 and the Endorphin Pro 4. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.